Lisa. Shalom, everybody. Two things before we start today. The first one, again, we're going to send our condolences to Susan Stein on the passing of our beloved friend and colleague, Rabbi Jonathan Stein, who passed away 8 days ago. Was a nice, gentle man, rabbi. We all miss him. The second thing I want to tell you that yesterday, Rabbi Jack Pasco from Congregation Shorei Shamayim in Lancaster, in Pennsylvania, spent the day with us. We visited 7 different programs, including 3 schools for children living on the poverty line, and a school with special education. And we met with evacuees from the north, and a special place for therapeutic education with animals, and a wounded woman from the Nova Festival. So there's 17 programs altogether, but we did 7 in one day. And Rabbi Pasco was with us. So we're very happy and pleased. I finished these announcements. I wanted to say that Hanukkah, there is a lot of activities too. I'm going to send everything by written, and whoever wants to participate can participate in whichever activity of Hanukkah. I think is about 10 activities we have in Hanukkah, so you can choose which one you want to participate. All right. There is 3 sayings that we sent today. The first one is of Rabbi Nehorai, the second one of Rabbi Yanai, and the third one is from Rabbi Matya ben Harash. I'm going to talk about the middle one, what Yanai says. It's a very important one, I think, and I think it's very well put as well. So Rabbi Yanai says, "En beyadeinu lo mishalvat harashaim be'af lo misurei hatzadikim." I'm going to translate a free translation. We don't have in our hands, in our understanding, not from the peace of the wicked, and not from the suffering of the righteous. Okay. A little bit about Rabbi Yanai first, and then I'm going to say something about the context that I was talking in Lachter. If you remember the first chapter of Pirkei Avot, there was the tradition from Hillel to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, right? All of the history of the sages of the Mishnah, biological. And then from chapter 2, there was from teachers to student, and was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and the Judaism after the destruction of the temple. No more sacrifices, but the learning of the Torah. Chapter number 3 was about Rabbi Akiva, the importance of the learning of the Torah. And chapter 4 we see is an anthology, and most of them is the generation that between the rebellion of Bar Kokhba, 132, 135, and the ending of the Mishnah, the compilation of the Mishnah, the year 200 about Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. So we are in chapter 4 more or less on the years 135 to 190, something like that, something in between. And this is important to understand our saying today, I think. Rabbi Yanai, we don't know much. Maybe he's the father of 2. He's not quoted a lot, and does make it more difficult to understand if there is any historical context or not. Rabbi Yanai is the generation between the horrible persecutions of the Romans and decrees of the Romans and the massive killing of Jews, maybe similar in numbers to the Holocaust in the Second World. And the generation of Rabbi Nasi, which is very peaceful and cooperation with the Romans and understanding. So we don't know if the saying is in a historical context or not. Most of the sayings in Pirkei Avot are universal. It's not about one individual or one period of time. It's like forever. It's ethics. But it's very interesting to see if these ethics are written in which time are these ethics written. The first interpretation that we don't know from the piece of the peaceful situation of the wicked to the suffering of the righteous. The first interpretation can be, we don't understand why some people suffer and it's righteous people and they suffer and they have a hard time. We can say this after October 7 very easily, right? I mean, these people were in the kibbutzim. They were not doing anything. I mean, which kind of punishment? It cannot be a punishment, right? We don't understand why they suffer. We don't understand why there is a lot of people that is coordinating all of these things in, I don't know, in Iran, and nothing happened to them. I mean, if it's a God that gives reward for the good deeds and punishment for the bad doings. So what's going on? Why don't we see this in our reality? Right? This is one of the hardest questions of all. How can be there is a wicked person that life is good to him, and there is somebody who is a righteous person, and his life is destroyed. There is many theological answers to this one, but the problem is a problem. You see a very nice person. I remember when I just was ordained as a rabbi, next to my congregation in Ramat Gan, there was a family, and the mother say to the 8 years old boy, when he walked with the 6 years old, to be close to the wall and not close to where the cars are, because it's dangerous that you can fall, and it's the road, it's a big avenue. And the boy listened to his mom and always take the sister and go close to the wall and very far away from the car. But one day, a car lost control and we went on the peatonal thing and killed both the 8 years old and the 6 years old sister, even that he did exactly what his mom says. There is not much answers to give, right? None of us can give an answer. I mean, they didn't do anything. So why they're, I don't know, punished? Punished because this driver, they lose, I don't know, the control on the car. Maybe he was drunk or whatever on daytime, and he just killed them both. So we see there is this very famous book, why good people suffer, and a lot of people read this book. Is trying to give me, but we don't have an answer now. Pirkei Avot is this. You remember that we say that the biblical sayings were the Proverbs. It was all of the ethics were in the book of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs was very clear. It says there is no shortcuts. If every day you work, at the end you're going to have money. You're going to have everything you need. You're not going to be poor. Just keep on working. If you look for shortcuts and you want to steal, you will be punished because eventually they will catch you. And as simple as that. There is a reward for what you do. For every day you do good things, there is a reward. Believe in this. This is the book of Proverbs in the Bible. There is definitely a compensation what you do. You do something bad will happen to you. You do something good is going to happen to you. You work, you're going to have, you steal, you're going to have punishment. That's the book of Proverbs. Our book, the third one will be the Maimonides, right? And the virtues of the personality. But here we are in a different period. This is the period that you can be righteous and the Romans just come and kill you. And you didn't do anything. You just, I don't know, you were studying the Torah or you just decided. And in the most cruel ways, because we know that second place to the Nazis, the Romans, they have all of this torture. They were experts in torture and cause suffering to everybody. So Ravi and I say, we don't have an explanation. We have to live with things that we don't understand, why these things happen. So that will be explanation number one. Explanation number two is in an historical context. And an historical context is that Ravi and I living now, let's say in the year 160, he say, we are not the generation that suffer from the Romans and the generation of suffering, but we are not also a generation that everything is paradise. We are in the middle. That will be in an historical context. In the middle of these two, that will be an interpretation. This is the third interpretation. There's three interpretations for this sentence. Is that we are all in between. We are. Let's put it, for example, in economics will be easier. We are not super rich and I don't know, tycoons, multi-billionaires, unfortunately, or maybe not unfortunately. But we are not also poor that we don't have money to eat. We are like in the middle. We don't know of the suffering of this and not of the enjoying of that. All of the Jews, we are in the middle. So we have to live our lives then managing in between the two extremes. So this is the three explanations. The first one is we don't have a clue why these things happen. You can believe in God, not believe in God, but there is not a direct divine providence on the individual. Not in the individual, not even in the generation. Judaism, biblical Judaism, and in general Judaism, has a saying that God's intervene in history. There is in chapter 3 it's a huge theological discussion between two sages on Pirkei Avot about if God intervenes in history or God doesn't intervene in history. But I'm coming back to chapter 4. We can say the same thing here, where God was in the Holocaust. On the other hand, you can say, look how we have the state of Israel, and it's a miracle that we win with so little chances. We can use it even to our days. So is God having divine providence on us as individual or as a nation? Or yes or no? It's very uncertain. Most of the people, when we have these topics, most of the people that I met say that they do believe in not even national providence, but in personal providence. They're saying somehow I feel God is with me, not all the time, but once in a while I can feel that God cares about me. This most of the people are there. Some of the people say no, I'm not so important, and maybe there is a divine providence, but it's like all together as a generation, as a people, and not me particular. Um, so we have here three explanations. One is eternal. The second one is like maybe for us the Jews, and the last one is definitely historic. And this is important because we can ask this 108 sayings in Pirkei Avot. We can ask this about all of them. Are these sayings like in Proverbs? They are eternal. They never change. It is nothing connected to an historical event. Can we say the same about Pirkei Avot and how we understand it? There was we go to the school that's called Dinur School. Many of you being with me to the Dinur School, and Dinur was the Minister of Education in the State of Israel, and he was himself a Jewish scholar. This is in the late 19th centuries and the beginning of the 20th century, Ben Zion Dinur, and he wrote an essay, a book on Pirkei Avot. It's a lot of commentaries on Pirkei Avot, and he said, especially on our commentary, that you have to look to the historical context of what the sages are saying. It's very puzzling, but the saying is always with me. Sometimes I think this eternal. You see some things that you say, oh, this is not fair. Life is not fair. And then maybe it's like safer to read it from the book of Proverbs, from Mishnah, and say, no, at the end, there is a reward for a good doing, and a punishment for bad, and eventually, I don't know, it takes 20, 30 years, but the terrorists get killed, and whoever, I don't know, still they catch him and go to prison, and it takes a long time, but eventually the justice takes time, but eventually is done. And sometimes not so much. I'm very much inclined on the book of Proverbs that if you do a good deed, it comes back to you good. If you do something not good, it comes back to you as well. It takes time, but it works. As individuals and as a nation. And sometimes we don't understand, but we have to have confidence that good will prevail. I finish with this. I'm passing you the microphone, and you can elaborate on these things or the other stuff.
Okay, well, those are the classical explanations you gave, and bravely. So thank you. And I think we'll start with our prayer so that I don't forget at the end.
Yes.
Anyone who wants to unmute can, but we'll say this together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So we're going to thank God for the mitzvot, including the mitzvah of studying Torah. I'm not sure where exactly. I'll find it for you in Talmud one day. But there's something that says studying Torah is the equivalent of having fulfilled all 613 mitzvot. So doesn't really absolve us from doing the other ones, but that's fine. Well, about this first, I'm going to put it up. Let's see. I'm going to try putting it up. Share. No, not at all.
Open the document first and then click share.
This document. Yes. Open the document and then go back to Zoom and say share.
And what you just put up had showed again with those big black blocks. That's a resource problem. Do you want me to post it?
And I say share like this, and it's got big black boxes.
Yeah, because the video processor is not working as it should.
The video processor.
But there's enough of it we can see.
You can see
I see
the
15.
text pretty much.
No, you see 15 from 15 down.
Great. That's all you need. That's all we need. That's fine. So I actually sent two separate things, and 15 and 16 had 15 kind of had two in there, but Edgar described Rabbi Yanai. One thing interesting about him is that this is his only statement in all the 6 books of the Mishnah. So I don't know if he was so pessimistic or down or depressed or what that he came up with this and they didn't include him anywhere else or why, but there are some baraitot that mention him. But this is his only statement in all of the Mishnah. That we have no comprehension of the tranquility of the wicked or the suffering of the good people. The book that I think Edgar was probably referring to was a rabbi in America named Kushner, and his book is When Bad Things Happen to Good People. And this is a whole book which it's a classic book which has sold in the millions. And my sister, who had a lot of patients with cystic fibrosis who would die, she would buy this book for people to help them cope with the loss of a child. Rabbi Kushner lost a child young from some other disease, and he tries to maintain faith in God and in a fair world or in an okay world, even though something awful happened to him. But some of the things that I thought about is a kind of relativism, and that is who do we think we are when we say someone is wicked, right? And we all follow politics, and usually the person we don't vote for is something close to wicked, and that's why we don't vote for them, whichever way you vote, and yet a lot of times you lose the election. Most people think that person who you thought was wicked is actually most people's choice because they're okay or they're good, or at any rate not as bad as wicked, and so that's called relativism. That what for me is wicked might be for any of you good, and vice versa. That the guy who I thought should win or the woman who I thought should win was a bad person, and so that's one other way to kind of interpret this. And then yet another way to interpret it is that it's not good to be too tranquil. Okay, if we're too tranquil, then you can, I read in one place, fall into the insubordination of wealth. You can kind of leave spirituality behind if you're too tranquil. So a little bit of challenge to a person is good, but obviously it's a matter of balance, and there has to be indeed some balance. And the other thing is that when Rabbi Yanai says "En biadeno," it's not in the comprehension of human beings to know the tranquility. I think that helps us perhaps to accept that there are things that we just can't understand. And I think Ted said recently when he was online, he's not in the group today, or at least not yet. He said he's 95 and there are things he doesn't understand yet and he can't explain yet. And if he hasn't figured it out yet, so maybe he never will, that there are just some things that are beyond our understanding. And I think in many ways God is that way, that you can't really nail down a single explanation or understanding of God or of the justice system. And I asked you at the end of this text, which is I hope is at the bottom of your screen, whether you think that life should be fair, because most people will say life is not fair in a kind of easy way, but should it be or or could it be? And then there's this concept of whether we deserve good in return for good, that the concept of deserving, in Hebrew it's magiali, is not always so clear cut as a good thing, that we decide what we deserve, that we deserve good rather than bad. Well, I'm going to move on to the next two before I'm going to open this for discussion, because in my text, so these are all in statement 15. So when Edgar says there are 108, it depends on how you count. That Rabbi Matya, the son of Chalash, would say, be the first to greet everyone. Makdim shalom kol adam. And that means everyone. Also, be a tail to lions rather than a head to foxes. And what this says, he says, Hevei zanavla, experience of making that choice. My own personal experience was I had to decide whether I wanted to be head of a department in Aria or be just one of the guys and not the head of anything in Rambam. And I felt that Rambam were the lions and I was going to keep learning if I would stay around good people. But I could give another example, and I could say when you're playing tennis, because I play tennis, that if you play with people who are not so good, so you'll always win, but it's not much of a game. And if you play with people who are a little better than you, then it brings you up and you learn and you get better. And the same thing with study and with Torah study and with all sorts of things, that if you're around people who know more than you, and that's why we study together, because each of the people here knows more than the rest on at least one subject or topic and brings that with them when we talk with each other, that's important. But part of the interpretation of being the first to greet every person connects to the previous statement that you should greet even a person who you think is wicked. And part of the explanation for that is so that they should not be insulted, because they probably don't think of themselves as being wicked. And just the concept of being the first to greet everyone is a concept that changed as I came to Israel, because in America it was very common to say good morning or have a nice day, or at least hi, hello, as you would pass someone on the street. And in Israel it was much less common. And it has become more common in some places, partly because it's a good idea in the supermarket if they are selling to you. If they say good afternoon or nice to see you or have a good day, then they're going to sell more. But it's also just a good policy. And there was one rabbi who'll appear in Avot who is credited as he was never second. He was always first to say shalom to anybody he passed. And I think it's a very good trait to be the first to greet everyone. And even if you're not first, if someone says hello, answer hello. And that's a nice thing to do. And then the second one that I put in here from 16 is a Rabbi Yaakov שאומר, העולם הזה דומה לפרוזדור בפני העולם הזה הבא, התקן עצמך בפרוזדור כדי שתיכנס לטרקלין, which compares this world to an antechamber before the world to come. A lot of people have pointed out that prosdo is a Greek word, and this is written during the time of Greeks, or under Greek influence, that he has this name rather than a taklin, but as a posdo, rather than a Hebrew word, a Greek word, and to prepare yourself in this world so that you can go into the main room, so that you can enter the banquet hall. And it's usually among those who believe in heaven, think of it in terms of do good mitzvot in this world, and then you'll have a place in heaven. But that's a way of interpreting it. So we'll go around, and Lorena, you're first today, and then Anita and Fred, get yourself unmuted, and Michael will be after them. You have to unmute yourself. We can't hear you because you're muted.
Who's first?
Lorena?
Oh, here. Okay. Now it's okay. Thank you. Yeah, which thing first? The one of the tranquility of the wicked?
Pick what's important to you.
Yeah, I mean, I very much grew up, of course, in the philosophical aftermath of the Second World War, and we were all the time kind of thinking, like, how could such a bad thing have happened? And the older I got, the more I come to this point that you also mentioned, they don't think of themselves as wicked. I heard an interview or read an interview with Hitler in the later days, and he was kind of moaning that he wasn't seen as the visionary that he thought of himself that he was. He felt misunderstood, and yeah, and I working with so many people. Indeed, many people do not think of themselves as wicked. Even good people, normal people. I was astonished because this happened actually in Israel, where a father beat his young girl to death, 3 years old. And he said, yeah, she shouldn't have run in front of the television during a goal. It was a football match.
Mm-hmm.
And then I become very quiet. But so that is a first layer. But then I think there is another layer, because the Nazis, as the Russians were coming, they were hiding the gas chambers. So if they really thought they were doing such a good thing, they should have waited for the Russians with wine and say, here, we did a good thing. So I think it's a top layer that people say we're doing a good thing. And sometimes it's true, but sometimes there is an under layer where people, when they come to die, that they confess that they were not so holy. So that's what I think.
Okay, excellent point. And we're going to have some discussion later on in Avot about the proper time to confess. And the proper time to confess, according to Avot, I'm going to give you a spoiler here, is 1 day before you die.
Yeah.
However, it will say in Avot, seeing as you don't know on what day you're going to die, so you should confess every day.
Yeah.
So that's one of the ways of looking at it. Good.
Yeah.
Anita and Fred, you're up.
Okay, I'll start first.
And Michael, you'll unmute.
Just in the last couple of days, I was reading a book with my grandson, who is going to be 5 in January. It's called Be Nice. It's a beautiful book, lovely pictures, and throughout the book are examples of children being nice to children of a great variety of diversity. And also animals with people and animals to animals. And he loves this book. He's read it many times. He knew the book better than I did. But there was one little, on the pages, there were various drawings. And he picked this out, and he did not like it because it was confusing. And I could see why it was. It was a cat sitting next to a cage, and the cat was letting the bird out of the cage. And his comment was, but cats often kill birds or hurt birds. Why is this bird being let out of the cage by the cat? And he was trying to put that together in his mind. And while we've been doing this class, I thought about how children learn this whole concept and build on it into adulthood, who then behave either wickedly or not, or respond to people or care for people. It's not an easy thing to learn. And he's right. Many cats do eat birds. So why in this case was this particular bird being released by a cat? So the complexity of making these decisions about who we care for, how we care for, whether or not someone is wicked or not. I mean, I do agree with the beginning. We may think somebody's wicked. There's no way we can really know another person thoroughly. We may think somebody is really wonderful, but there may be pieces that we're missing. And I think in the sense this cat and the bird was part of that. We're not all one or the other, and it can switch around.
Well,
That's
that's great, and it goes to Edgar's discussion of the balance, that no
Yes.
one is all good or all bad, and we're supposed to try and keep our balance in the favorable column. I'm only going to tongue-in-cheek say that any cat that lets a bird out of the cage, it's because the cat can't fit inside the cage to catch the bird.
Yeah, good point.
If he lets him out, that might be what. So it could be an ulterior motive, and it could be a nice motive, and it depends on what's the next page. But if it's a book about being nice, then maybe that was just a nice cat. And I'm sure there are some that are nice. Some people are cat lovers, some dog lovers.
That's what we concluded, that it was a nice cat. It was too complicated.
But I think you ask a really good question, and that is how to build a character, starting with children or with ourselves, of nice, of good, as opposed to how to build a character that's just based on instinct and first inclinations. And that's a really powerful question. For children, there are books of how to be nice. Maybe that helps, but building that character goes all the way to people in their later stages of life, reading Pirkei Avot, which is supposed to help us to be somewhat nice, or the better way to live. So that's great. Fred?
Speaking of balance, as you just did, maybe sometimes it's best to be a tail to lions, and sometimes it's best to be a head to foxes. So it's good to have your career at Rambam rather than at Naharia. But maybe if you have your career at Rambam, it's best to sometimes give a grand rounds at Naharia. That way you share the wisdom and keep things flowing from the top to the bottom. And also, it makes you feel good.
Well, it did make me feel good. So I spent 5 years doing 1 day a week in Naharia. So you hit the nail on the head. You figured me out. So you might not be able to know anyone really thoroughly, as Anita said, but you're a pretty good judge of character. That's what I did. 1 day a week, including during a war with missiles flying on my way there. Oh, that was in 2006. That was dicey, let's say. Okay, Michael, welcome back. How do you deal with these issues? You're muted. Michael, you're muted.
He's not muted, his sound.
Can you raise the sound in your microphone?
Now he's muted.
Michael, you're muted. First unmute and then get close to the computer. First unmute.
Michael has a new computer.
Oh, Mazel Tov, Pirkei.
Now get close to the computer. If you get close.
Oh,
Michael's got an audio problem.
yes, you have a funny problem. You may have to click out of the Zoom and back on because you're sounding like kind of like Donald Duck.
Minnie
That
Mouse.
happened before. I think it was with you.
Yeah, a couple of times. Okay, so who now?
Okay, Liz, why don't you and Michael will come back to you.
Okay.
And if we can't, so we're going to get to you, Flores.
One of the things that occurred to me when the rabbi was talking about karma, how things happen, why they happen. It's a very, very hard concept. And particularly, when he mentioned about the little boy and the little girl being hit by a driver, you could always blame the driver. He was not paying attention, he was drunk. But when things happen to you all on their own, those are very, very hard to understand. Why me? Why am I getting this? People don't think everybody's happy when they win the lottery, and they don't think about when they win the negative lottery, that these things just happen. And it reminded me of in the late 60s, early 70s, when they came up with this, became very popular to talk about instant karma. That you would see somebody do something and say, that's not good. And then all of a sudden, boom, something happens. You go, you see, I told you that wasn't a good idea. So that's basically it. And the other thing is yesterday, I had coffee with somebody who was relatively new to this area and told me that they went to this lecture because somebody said, oh, you'll meet so many people. And he went to the lecture and not one person said anything to him. And, of course, then it put him off to going back to that place, for more lectures. But then it comes out, I said, gee, that's never happened to me, that I go ahead and introduce myself to people. And if you don't, the answer is, well, I'm shy, so it's like you can't, understand some of your behavior, but then not blame other people. Why didn't anybody, he would have been recognized perhaps as somebody new, but nobody said anything to him. And I tried to explain, you need to go with somebody like me who can introduce you to people. So, it's, I remember as a child, my standing up on top of the toilet seat, my mother looking my body over saying, you've got chicken pox. And, my screaming, tell them to go away. This isn't fair. Tell them to go away. That it's as a young, and I was probably 4 or 5, that as Anita was talking about her grandson, it's very hard to develop these concepts of it isn't fair. And, at my age now, there's so many things that I still think, well, that's not fair. And I don't know that we ever come to terms with what's fair, what isn't. And the biggest one being the fact that we all have to die. And, as a child, you say, I don't like this. I don't want to, that's not fair. I want to stick around. I want to see what happens to my grandchildren. It's not fair. That's to me is the biggest, it's not fair.
Well, that's really good. First of all, congratulations on being a strong person who goes out and greets people and is willing to greet people and introduce someone to other people. But indeed, there are people who, as you said, are shy or embarrassed or feel too vulnerable that if they say hello, no one else will say hello to them. But Edgar and I went to a conference where there was a Christian minister named Rick Sandler, and he had a parish which he started out of his truck and eventually had many more than 1,000 people coming on Sundays. And he said it's because you greet people warmly. And at the entrance to his church, he had greeters. He had 2 greeters, and everyone who walked in, hello, hi, who are you? This is who I am. Have you been here before? If not, I'm going to introduce you to somebody. And he says, if people feel there's love in the room, then even if you lock the doors, they're going to knock it down and they're going to come in. So the idea of greeting is really important, and some of us have it. We have, well, my stepmother might call it the gift of gab, but some of us have the tendency to just reach out and hope people will answer us, but don't get destroyed if they don't. And I continue to walk around the Carmel and I say shalom and I say boker tov, and some people just kind of look down, and a lot of people have earbuds in so that it seems like an excuse that they maybe didn't hear. But some, of course, answer, and that makes it worth it. And I don't think I'm going to change about that. All right. Well, good that you offered to someone else that you'll do the first greeting for them. But yes, what this Rabbi Matya is saying is be first to greet everyone, and that means everyone, pretty much everyone. Flores, and then we're going to try and get back to Michael and hope he's unmuted and doesn't sound like Donald Duck.
Yes, well, on Shabbat, I'm dressed in my Shabbat clothes and everything. And as I go to visit friends, I pass people and I say Shabbat Shalom. And I can see them struggling because they're either getting into their car or they're doing whatever they're doing. For me, it doesn't make a difference what they're doing. It's Shabbat, and I'm wishing them the greeting that's there. And I've noticed over the years that some of there's a man particularly, there's a stairs that takes me down to a road. And over the years, I've always greeted him on my way down. And now, the other day, I pretended I didn't see him. It was Shabbat. And he called out, he said, Geveret, Shabbat Shalom. I said, I didn't see you. And I realized then that there was no barrier. He was comfortable. He was smoking a cigarette like he usually does. And I was dressed in my Shabbat finery. And I was so thrilled. I was absolutely thrilled because he then saw there was no judgment. I didn't care what he was doing. I was just greeting a human being. So, but I do greet people. And I learned that from a rabbinite. When I was in London, it was a lovely, she is a lovely, lovely rabbi's wife. And I saw her in the department store, and I thought, I can't possibly go to Rabbinate Code. She'd be busy and this, that, and the other. So I pretended to look away. And she came up to me and she said, hello, Flores. Lovely to see you here. And I learned from that, don't make excuses. Just go up and say hello. So she was a great teacher to me. If someone's busy, there's I can't stop or any, but that was a very good thing. The humility of her to come to me, was very good. So that was that. So about the wicked, I think that comes down to judgment. Some people are wicked, yes.
Boris, you dropped?
Yes, I did. Yes. Should I stop?
That's fine. I just want to congratulate you on your strength in not only saying a greeting to people, but especially in modestly or humbly saying there were a couple of cases where you pretended not to see them so as not to get in trouble with them. And yet you learn from them that, yes, it is a good idea to meet people. And by your persistence, and it does take persistence, just like children, it takes a while until they learn to say please or thank you. But if you keep telling them, then there's a fair chance that that over time they will adopt healthier or better spiritual habits. Michael, let's try again.
Hello.
Oh, good. It works. Great.
Okay.
Welcome back.
A couple of things. Number one, I have a very harsh view on a lot of things, but I do believe that you learn by being taught. As they always said, you've got to be taught to hate all the people that your relatives hate. As so would say in South Pacific. But if people want to be nice, it's usually that they've had some good experience or they've been taught that is what is appropriate. I mean, I was on the bus yesterday. Now, I'm tall. The only seats I can sit in are the ones where there is a seat opposing me. Got on. All of the seats were taken by children, probably no, and they, by the way, they're all Dati, as an aside, who were no more than 10 years old. And they were oblivious to everybody on the bus, which meant that this is what they had been taught. Because, and then you go back and somebody had mentioned about Germany. Hitler was right. You indoctrinate the children. That is how you're going to get everything done. And this is the way the society functions. You learn by what you're taught. And if you're taught kindness, you're going to reciprocate. If you're taught nastiness or viciousness, that's the way you're going to react. If you're taught to be oblivious to everybody around you, you're going to be oblivious. And what is it? Abraham invites people into his tent. I don't know where he learned it, but he learned it. Lot lived in a city where corruption was the acceptable means in society. And therefore, that is what the people did in that society. So that's the way I view things. Whatever you learn by what you are taught, you emulate by what you are taught. Sometimes through your own experiences, whether they be good or bad, you may modify your experience. You may modify the way you react. But I'm cynical. Maybe that's because I'm an history major. If you think that the Romans were bad, they were kind compared to what the Assyrians did to people. And then the Germans were far worse. And part of the German was their mentality, the Prussian mentality that seeped in. So,
well, I appreciate where you're coming from, and I'm sure you're not always cynical, but sometimes optimistic and sometimes cynical. I'm going to tell you one other thing about this Rabbi Matya that's going to make us all feel a little good before we go to Gershon, who's last. And that is that Rabbi Matya is credited with the expression in the Talmud that says, Ladu be'eretz Yisrael shekul keneged kol mitzvot, which means if you live in the state of Israel, that's as good as performing all, that's the equivalent of fulfilling all 613 mitzvot. So seeing as everyone here is living in Israel, we all get all 613 points if there's a point system up there somewhere. And as we've said, we don't know what the points are, so we're not sure how many points for each mitzvah. But that's one of the nice things that came from this Rabbi Matya, who said, be first to greet everyone, be a tell to lions. And yes, I agree very much with you that being nice and being humane and being decent is a matter of learning. I only take slight exception, you probably won't disagree with me, that it's not just what children learn, it's what we learn as adults too. And as long as we keep learning and relearning to be good and decent people, then I think we're on the right track. But I think as soon as you leave that, if you lose it and you just stop studying altogether, stop learning, and depend on yourself alone than your own good education, so you're more in trouble. Can you agree with that, Michael?
Yes.
Okay, we're on the same page then, sure. Gershon, no surprise.
First of all, is my sound okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll address what we think that we ourselves deserve. And for me personally, I think I probably get more than I deserve, but deserve some good things. And I would say that a lot of the answer to this also comes out of, do we expect to get what we deserve? Another aspect of that, which everybody, again, has to answer for themselves. I don't particularly, and I know that not everyone does get what they deserve, at least not in the time that I see them or know them. But basically, I think a lot of getting what we deserve has to do with internal things of how we feel about ourselves. And I think that people who try to do good things probably feel a good deal better about themselves than people who go out of their way to do bad things and probably don't feel great about themselves. And just to add to that, the part about greeting others, a short story, when we were first moving to the Chicago suburbs from New Jersey, I sort of moved there first and spent some Friday nights visiting different Reform synagogues in the area. And I visited one in Lombard, Illinois, called Eitz Chaim. And it happened to be Shavuot, actually, that I visited there. And I dressed in a suit and tie. Turned out I was the only person dressed in a suit and tie. Everybody else was more casual, so it was very obvious that I was not someone who had been there before. And quite a number of people, at least 5 different people, came up and introduced themselves after the service and gave this warm, wonderful feeling. And one of them, to top it off, took me and introduced me to Rabbi Bob. And I thought, okay, this is the ultimate and informal in a U.S. synagogue. They're introducing me to Rabbi Bob. Only later did I find out that they introduced me to Rabbi Stephen Bob. And that it wasn't quite as informal as I thought, but yet was still very warm and welcoming. And we were attendants and members there for the 13 years before we made Aliyah. So we got to return the favor to many others. I'll stop with that.
Well, it's a very good feeling to feel that you're getting more than you deserve. I'll admit I feel the same way. You and I have had the experience, and Anita and Fred and other people in medicine of hearing, people who are sick. I don't deserve this. They get a heart attack in your department, or they get a cancer in my department. And what did I do to deserve this? And the answer is that's not how sickness works. And it's not about deserving or not deserving. And it's interesting that there's a lot now going on in the world of obesity, which I'm also very involved in my profession, that the people who are overweight are much more looked at, stigmatized as deserving the diseases that come with obesity because they overate, as opposed to the people with high blood pressure, or the people with diabetes, or the people with certain other diseases. And it used to be that way for sure with the people who had HIV/AIDS disease, that they got themselves sick and in some way perhaps deserved what they got. And sickness just doesn't work that way. And it's just a different plane so no one really deserves some of these bad things. But as Liz said, some people win the negative lottery. I like that expression because I think that's what she was talking about. And I wish you all a good Shabbat. I hope we all have a quiet, peaceful Shabbat. Last week there were still bombs going off, and now no bombs, no sirens, peace, and we're still dealing very much with the people who have been harmed by them, people who are refugees from their homes and not ready to move north yet, people who from the south whose kibbutz was destroyed, but hopefully now we're on a path to peace, and let there be a Shabbat Shalom to all of you. See you next week.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I just wanted to remind you that the 26th of December is the first night of Hanukkah.
Yes.
And the 2nd of January is also Thursday, is the last night of Hanukkah. We're going to just talk to everybody and we'll try to decide together what we do.
Okay.
Thank you
Shabbat,
both.
everybody. Bye. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Yeah.